Hey guys, what's going on? It's King Bedhead here. Today giving you a little book review action of Dark Imperium by Guy Haley. Set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, this is a bit of an epic odyssey following the tail end of the Indominus Crusade. Robert Guillemot, my favorite Frenchman of the far future, is excavating, exploring, exploring, trapezing with his Ultramarine army into the Eye of Terror and beyond. And as he's facing down all these different Xenos and, reclaiming the 500 worlds, he suddenly receives a distress message. His brother Mortarion, the Primarch of the Death Guard, super nasty dude. He's got like big bug wings, really bad attitude, really smelly smell. And now he is camping out at the edges of Ultramar, at the edge of the system, waiting to pounce and strike at Macragge, the Ultramarine homeworld. We get a lot of thinking from Robert Guillemot about his history with his brother Mortarion. There's a lot of pondering. So this was my introduction into the 40,000 Black Library, the lore universe, my first real dipping my toe, not counting things like 1D4chan or, like the 40K wiki or like any of those places where you can kind of just like mass digest, like the subreddit, whatever. So I felt like I knew a lot of facts about the Warhammer universe, but I didn't know what the voice was going to be for the actual writing. I kind of had a sense, based on what I had read in the codex, and I feel ignorant right now. I'm going to have to look it up later to find out, like, do they have the same guys doing Black Library books as they have, like, writing the short stories in the codices? The short stories you get in the codices, they're going to be very, like, grand military strategy, basically working at the same kind of scope that you would expect, a 40K battle to play out at. And what we're finding here is, obviously a lot more personal stories. We track several characters throughout the book, obviously the main one being Robert Guillemot, but we also get to follow along with Bolus and Varens, who are two veterans. They're not Space Marines, they're just mortal Imperial Guard soldiers, and they have to deal with Plague Marines, and it scars them psychologically. Great, like, deep personal and world building stuff. They have a narrative arc that I think is identifiable, by going through some of the tropes that we see in other stories about military recovery, with like real world soldiers. But then, things get crazy when Nurgle's Garden has some plants thrown their way. I won't go any deeper into that. Spoilers. So I picked this up like 2 months ago. I was reading it mainly as a computer paperback. It was okay chapter length for it, but a little on the long side. I have like a 10-ish minute bus ride, a 15-ish minute trolley ride. There's like a connection in there. And most chapters would spill over a little bit. Like I could get like a chapter and a half done in that whole 30-40 minutes commute. But there were like some that were wicked short, so especially earlier on, I felt like as the book went on, the chapters got longer, which was kind of frustrating pacing in some ways, because it felt like things really slowed down, which is ironic because basically the whole plot pacing of the book is that you have this crusade that wraps up like right at the beginning, like the good guys win, and there's like a lot of interesting world building stuff about like how fast they're able to like do an infrastructure on this planet that they just conquered. Like they're able to like set up a big military parade, and they talk about the scale of it. It's really impressive, typical 40K scale stuff. But then like they got to go back to Ultramar, right? And we're getting deeper and deeper looks at kind of like some of the internal politics that Guillemot has to deal with, especially now that he's not just like out doing his own thing on a crusade with people who want to follow him on a crusade. He's going back into his own territory. He's, dealing with planetary governors who may or may not necessarily want to align with him. There's some interesting stuff that's happening with some of this politicking, but none of it ever really feels like it's of consequence. It's just like, these are the things that give Robert Guillemot headaches. So whatever. It's fine, right? Because this story isn't really about that conflict. This is supposed to be about the conflict of, like, Robert and Mortarion. The brother is, like, essentially taunting him back home. How's he going to handle this conflict? Oh, forgot to mention, the whole book starts off, like, 10,000 years earlier in the whole 40k timeline, where we see Robert confronting Mortarion in, like, boarding action combat. And then he gets his throat slit, and he's, like, in stasis for 10,000 years. So again, this being my intro to, like, 40k lore, I guess that wasn't a spoiler because it happens in the first chapter, but, like, this timeline is so vast. We're talking about, like, 10,000 years in this intro until the main chunk of the book starts. It's weird that there's this kind of undercurrent theme throughout the book of, like, oh, like, old versus new. Because that doesn't really end up playing out in any of the final conflict. I don't really want to get into too many spoilers, but I will say this, and so, like, skip forward a minute or whatever if you don't want to hear this. There is a final battle that is not with Mortarion, and the thing that's killed instead of Mortarion, like, I'd never heard of before this, and it sounds like was a one-off character. So the book starts with this, like, conflict, these brothers, like, it's intense, da-da-da-da-da. And we get, like, glimpses of Mortarion's, plague messy world. He's plotting to bring his brother back. And nothing actually happens, That's not resolved. Like, oh, Mortarion's base is on another planet. Okay. This isn't the Lord of the Rings where you can cut off, like, after book one, being like, yeah, they're on their way. To do the ring, to do the thing, whatever. You can't cut off like this when there's such a clear push and pull. To me, I get that this is a series, it's going to be ongoing, but, like, I guess the most generous thing you could say about, like, how Mortarion was portrayed in the climax of the book is that, like, he sets a trap. And he's not there for it. So he doesn't really impact me for, like, the whole final, like, 40 pages of the book. Whatever. So that was kind of my main criticism of it, some of the pacing inconsistency, but again, there's some really interesting characters. One final, like, side character I want to give a shout out to is there's Father Matthew, who's just like a priest. Although, and it's interesting, they introduce him basically being, like, the one guy who isn't, like, having a religious freak out when he meets Robert Guillemot. Cool. But then in the climax of the book, his whole thing is, like, he's, like, on his knees, like, begging Robert, like, tell me the Emperor's a god, which Robert doesn't believe, but everybody 10,000 years past this time does. So he has this religious, like, freak-out moment, and it goes against everything about his, like, calm demeanor that we've read for, like, literally the entire book. And that was a huge bummer, because between that, not having the conflict with Mortarion, I'm like, Robert, like, what are you doing here? Like, you're personally getting involved trying to chase this dude down. You're clearly having some hiring misjudgments because this dude, like, for the one quality you hired him for, his chillness, is no longer chill. I want to see Robert get it together because he's obviously the smartest dude in the 41st century, according to himself in this. And I am on the hook because the action was sweet. There was a lot of stuff blown up. There were a lot of Chaos Marines killed, and they deserved it. And I'm, like, ready to go worship the Emperor myself after reading this book. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I'm there for it, and I will follow Robert to whatever the hell the sequel is to this book. But it's going to be a bumpy ride. Alright, that's all I got. I hope you guys enjoyed this little review. Obviously, I haven't really done a lot of book reviews before. Let me know in the comments what you think. Feel free to hit me up on my other channels. Let me know what you think. Peace out, guys. Thanks.